The morning sun crept slowly over the rooftops of Harmony Ridge, painting the manicured lawns in a glow that felt almost artificial. This was a neighborhood built on appearances, hedges trimmed to the inch, houses painted in regulation-approved tones, mailboxes matching like soldiers in a line. To the outside world, Harmony Ridge looked like perfection. But to those who lived within, perfection often came at a cost. Rules, surveillance, and in some cases, prejudice, disguised as community standards. For Isaiah Brooks, Harmony Ridge had promised peace when he first moved there. A respected judge in Savannah, Georgia, he had carried the weight of other people's conflicts for decades. His courtroom was filled with broken families, heated arguments, and desperate pleas. Home, he thought, should be the opposite, a sanctuary where he could breathe freely, water his hydrangeas, and sit on the porch with his younger sister, Laurel. That was the life he envisioned. That was the life Harmony Ridge had promised. But peace is fragile, and in Isaiah's neighborhood, it had a name: Pamela Whitaker. Pamela was the self-appointed queen of Harmony Ridge, a woman whose veins seemed to pump vinegar instead of blood. As president of the HOA, she clutched her clipboard as though it was scripture, quoting bylaws like commandments. To some neighbors, she was simply strict. To Isaiah, she was something else entirely. A storm brewing just across the street. The first time they clashed seemed almost laughable. Isaiah was watering his plants one warm evening when Pamela marched up, her lips pursed into a hard line. "Judge Brooks," she said, skipping pleasantries, "your porch light stays on past 11. The bylaws clearly state it must be off by then. You're disrupting the harmony of the neighborhood." Isaiah set down the hose, studied her face, and replied with the patience that had carried him through countless trials. "Good evening to you too, Ms. Whitaker. That light is for security. It shuts off by midnight." Her eyes narrowed. "The rules are the rules." He offered a faint smile. Noted, "I'll look into it." For Isaiah, it was nothing more than an inconvenience. But for Pamela, it was the opening shot of a battle she had been waiting for. Within weeks, letters began showing up in Isaiah's mailbox. His hedges were too high, his mailbox was the wrong shade of black. Guests who visited his home stayed longer than permitted. Each letter carried her sharp handwriting, her signature scrawled at the bottom like a warning. At first, Isaiah chuckled, tossing them into a drawer, but Laurel, who often stopped by after work, wasn't laughing. "She doesn't bother anyone else like this," Laurel said one evening, flipping through the stack of complaints. "This is personal." Isaiah sighed, stirring the pot of gumbo, simmering on the stove. "Maybe I just got unlucky." But Laurel shook her head. Unlucky doesn't write 5 letters in a month. This is targeted Isaiah, and we both know why. Isaiah's jaw tightened. He didn't want to say it out loud, not yet, but he felt it too. The glances that lingered a little too long, the muttered comments about how some people didn't belong. The way Pamela's eyes didn't just see a neighbor, they saw a black man in a space she thought she owned. Victor Daniels, Isaiah's oldest friend, confirmed it bluntly over sweet tea one Saturday on the back porch. "Man, she's not mad about hedges, she's mad about you, about what you represent. You're a black judge living better than she thinks you should, and she can't stand it." Isaiah frowned, gazing across the street where Pamela's porch light glared like a watchtower. "I've spent my life believing in fairness, Vic. I can't just assume the worst." Victor shook his head. "Sometimes the worst assumes you. Don't ignore it." But ignoring was what Isaiah tried to do. He kept tending his garden, kept waving politely to neighbors, kept pretending Harmony Ridge was the sanctuary he had hoped for. Still, Pamela's shadow grew longer. She began pacing the sidewalk near his house late at night, scribbling notes on her clipboard. She snapped photos of his driveway when visitors parked there. And once, when Isaiah was grilling steaks in the backyard, she appeared at the fence, phone raised like a weapon. "You know the rules about yard waste," she called, angling her camera toward the leaves he'd just raked into a bag. Isaiah straightened slowly, barbecue tongs in hand. "I take care of my yard, Ms. Whitaker, always have." Her lips tightened. We'll see what the board says. That evening, Laurel urged him again. This isn't just rules, this is harassment. She's trying to wear you down. Isaiah rubbed his temples. If I make it a fight, Laurel, it becomes a bigger story. People will say, I'm abusing my position. I just want peace. But Pamela didn't want peace. And the neighbors could see it too. Linda Garvey, a retired teacher who lived 2 houses down, whispered at the mailbox one morning. She doesn't bother anyone like that, except you. It's strange, Isaiah. Dangerous even. By spring, Pamela's fixation had turned into obsession. She wasn't just writing letters, she was muttering under her breath at HOA meetings, pointing her finger toward Isaiah when she talked about people who don't belong. Neighbors began to whisper, wondering why one man seemed to draw all her fury. And though Isaiah tried to stay calm, even he couldn't ignore the way her words cut deeper each time. Some people think rules don't apply to them because of who they are, Pamela snapped during one heated HOA meeting. The room fell silent. Every eye turned to Isaiah. He rose slowly, buttoned his suit jacket, and spoke with the steady authority that had defined his career. I have respected this community. I have respected you, Ms. Whitaker. But this isn't about lights or hedges. This is about something else, and we all know it. Pamela's face flushed crimson, but she said nothing. Neighbors left that meeting unsettled. For some, it was the first time they'd seen the undercurrent of prejudice laid bare. For Isaiah, it was a confirmation of what he had felt all along. Pamela wasn't just enforcing rules, she was trying to erase him. And though Isaiah still clung to patience, still believed in dignity, he couldn't shake the sense that Pamela was building towards something worse. Something that wouldn't be written on paper or shouted in a meeting, but burned into the night itself. Summer in Savannah brought heat that clung to the skin and air so thick it felt alive. For most people in Harmony Ridge, summer meant cookouts, children chasing sprinklers, and evenings on the porch sipping sweet tea. But for Isaiah Brooks, summer meant Pamela Whitaker's obsession rising with the temperature. She was no longer subtle. Neighbors reported seeing her pacing in front of his house late at night, muttering words they couldn't quite make out. One teenager told Laurel he overheard her say, "He doesn't belong here. Not him, not ever." Isaiah tried to brush it off, but even his patience had limits. One evening, after a long day in court, he stepped out of his car with his tie loosened, exhaustion etched into his shoulders. Pamela's voice cut through the humid night air from her porch across the street. "You think you're better than us?" "Judge Brooks," she spat, wineglass trembling in her hand. Isaiah turned, keys still in hand. "I've just worked a long day, Ms. Whitaker. Let's leave it at that." But she didn't stop. "You think rules don't apply to you? You think your robe makes you untouchable?" He said nothing more, walking inside and locking the door. But later that night, as he and Laurel sat in the living room, a sharp thud rattled the front door. Isaiah checked the camera footage. A small rock lay on the porch mat, Pamela's shadow flickering at the edge of the frame before vanishing. "This is harassment," Laurel said, her voice shaking. Isaiah exhaled slowly. "I'm documenting every word, every action. But until she crosses the line into criminal, all I have is nuisance." Laurel gripped his arm. "She's testing you, Isaiah, seeing how far she can go." And Laurel was right. Pamela's tests grew bolder. She filed noise complaints when Isaiah's nephew Julian practiced his saxophone at 5 p.m. on a Saturday. She accused Isaiah of hosting unauthorized gatherings when Laurel brought friends for dinner. She even claimed his American flag wasn't properly displayed. Each complaint carried venom. Each glance across the street was a dare. Victor Daniels saw it too. One afternoon, he dropped off fishing gear and found Pamela standing at the edge of Isaiah's driveway, snapping photos with her phone. He raised his voice from the sidewalk. "Lady, you got nothing better to do." Pamela stiffened but said nothing, retreating to her porch with a look that could curdle milk. Victor turned to Isaiah. "She's not just obsessed, she's dangerous. You better be ready for whatever she's building toward." Isaiah nodded. "That's why I installed cameras. Not because I think she'll go that far, but because I need peace of mind. But the footage didn't bring peace. It showed Pamela circling his property at midnight, notebook in hand, scribbling furiously. It showed her standing at the edge of his yard, whispering words no one could hear. When Laurel watched the videos with him, she shook her head. She's obsessed. This isn't about hedges or porch lights, it's about you. Isaiah tried to steady himself. Obsession is one thing, malice is another. I need to know which one this is. But he already knew. The line between the two was fading. The breaking point came during an HOA meeting in early July. Residents filled the community center, chatting about pool hours and landscaping contracts. Pamela, seated at the front with her papers fanned out like weapons, scanned the crowd until her eyes locked on Isaiah. I want to address repeated violations, she announced sharply, voice slicing through the chatter. There are individuals in this neighborhood who treat the rest of us like we're beneath them. Murmurs rippled through the room. Everyone knew who she meant. Before Isaiah could respond, Linda Garvey rose from her seat. With all due respect, Pamela, Isaiah has done more for this neighborhood than anyone. He shoveled snow last winter. He fixed my fence without being asked. Pamela snapped back. Good deeds don't erase known compliance. Some people hide behind titles. Judges, lawyers thinking rules don't apply to them. Gasps filled the room. Isaiah rose slowly, buttoned his jacket, and spoke with calm authority. I have respected this community. I have respected you, Ms. Whitaker. But this has gone too far. This isn't about porch lights. This isn't about hedges. This is about prejudice. And we all know it. The room fell silent. Pamela's face flushed crimson, but she offered no reply. That night, Victor called Isaiah. You need to watch yourself. People like her, they don't stop, they escalate. Isaiah rubbed his forehead, staring at the glow of Pamela's porch light across the street. I know, I just don't want to believe it'll go that far. But it did. Late one July night, Isaiah woke to the smell of smoke. At first, he thought it was a dream, but then he heard the crackle, saw the haze seeping into his bedroom. He leaped from bed, coughing, stumbling toward the stairs as flames licked. Up the walls, the security alarm screamed. The heat grew unbearable. He grabbed his briefcase, one of the only things he would salvage, and fought his way out the front door. Neighbors rushed from their houses. Linda screamed his name, helping him to the curb as sirens wailed in the distance. Fire engines roared up the street, red lights painting Harmony Ridge in chaos. Isaiah stood barefoot, gasping, watching his home collapse into itself. Memories, photos, Janice's hydrangeas, all reduced to ash. Victor arrived minutes later, gripping Isaiah's shoulder hard. She did this, Isaiah whispered hoarsely. I know she did. Investigators confirmed his fears by dawn. Accelerant traces along the fence line, a melted gas nozzle, security footage of Pamela's SUV circling the block at 2 a.m. 2 days later, deputies led Pamela away in handcuffs. She didn't cry, she didn't hang her head. She lifted her chin, eyes cold, as if daring anyone to challenge her. But the true shock was still to come. Because weeks later, Isaiah would walk into his own courtroom and find the woman who burned his house to the ground sitting at the defendant's table. Monday morning broke heavy with humidity. But outside the Chatham County Courthouse in downtown Savannah, the air carried a sharper tension. News vans lined the street. Reporters clutched microphones, cameras poised at the entrance where deputies would soon lead in Pamela Whitaker, HOA president, now accused of felony arson, hate-motivated harassment, and destruction of property. For weeks, the community of Harmony Ridge had whispered, speculated, even argued in grocery aisles about whether Pamela could really have done it. But the evidence was damning. The security footage, the gas can found in her garage, the accelerant traced back to the fire that gutted Isaiah Brooks's home. What none of them were prepared for was the twist of fate that made the case feel more like a movie than real life. Because the victim of Pamela's crime wasn't just any man. He was Judge Isaiah Brooks, the very man presiding over the docket she would face that week. The courtroom filled fast. Neighbors from Harmony Ridge sat shoulder to shoulder in the gallery, some there out of loyalty to Isaiah, others from disbelief, and a few from a morbid curiosity. Laurel sat in the front row, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles whitened. Victor stood beside her, broad-shouldered and steady, casting protective glances her way. All rise. The bailiff called, and the heavy wooden doors swung open. Pamela was escorted inside, shackled at the wrists, wearing a county-issued jumpsuit. Her blonde hair was limp, her face pale but defiant. She scanned the room as if looking for sympathy. But when her gaze reached the bench, she froze. Isaiah sat tall in his black robe, expression unreadable. Behind the calm, his chest was a storm. He had presided over murder trials, corruption scandals, drug cases that tested the limits of patience. But nothing had prepared him for this forelooking into the eyes of the woman who had tried to erase him from his own life. The gallery went silent. Even the reporters in the back lowered their pens, as if the air itself demanded reverence. Pamela's knees buckled slightly, and the deputy had to steady her before she sat. Isaiah's voice was deep, measured, controlled. "Be seated." The benches creaked as everyone sat. Pamela's attorney, Gerald Hinton, leaned toward her, whispering harshly, "Don't look at him." Eyes on me, but it was too late. The damage was done. Everyone had witnessed the electric collision of victim and judge. When Isaiah called the case, Gerald rose. "Your Honor, with all due respect, my client pleads not guilty." A ripple of disbelief moved through the room. "Not guilty," a neighbor muttered under her breath. Everyone knew about the footage. Everyone had seen the evidence. Yet here, Pamela sat, chin lifted, denying it all. Isaiah's face remained still, though inside, he felt the sting of insult. His house was ashes, his memories charred, and yet Pamela dared to smirk, as though forcing him into this position was her victory. The prosecutor stood outlining the charges: felony arson, destruction of property, harassment with hate crime enhancements. The words hung heavy in the air, every syllable hammering home the reality of what had happened. Pamela shifted in her seat, hands trembling slightly, but then she did something that unsettled everyone. She smiled just for a second. It wasn't joy. It was satisfaction. The look of someone who thought control was still hers to claim. Trial moved quickly. Surveillance footage was played, showing Pamela's SUV circling Isaiah's block just before the fire erupted. Neighbors testified about her late-night pacing, her muttered words, her relentless obsession. Linda Garvey took the stand, her voice trembling at first, but growing stronger. "I warned my husband something bad was coming. I never thought it would be this." But she was fixated on him. Always. And it wasn't just about rules, it was about race. She said it herself, more than once. That he didn't belong here. Gasps filled the gallery. Pamela shook her head violently, but the jury's eyes stayed fixed on her. Victor testified next. His voice was steady, filled with the weight of loyalty and anger. "I've known Isaiah for 30 years. He's a man of patience, of dignity. I told him to watch his back. I just never thought I'd be standing here saying I was right." Each testimony tightened the noose around Pamela's case, but the most haunting moment came when the prosecution played Isaiah's 911 call. His hoarse voice crackled through the speakers, coughing as he told dispatchers his address, choking out words while flames devoured his home. The gallery shifted uncomfortably. Some neighbors bowed their heads. Laurel covered her mouth, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. Even reporters, hardened to tragedy, looked shaken. Pamela's attorney tried to argue. He claimed she was misunderstood, stressed, unfairly vilified by the neighborhood. He raised technical questions about camera footage. He painted her as a woman pushed to her breaking point. But every word fell flat. The evidence was too overwhelming, her smirk, to freshen the jury's memory. By the second day, the gallery was overflowing. National outlets had picked up the story. HOA president accused of arson faces judge who was her victim. The spectacle was undeniable. But for Isaiah, it wasn't theater. It was his life, his loss, his test. During one tense moment, Gerald motioned for a mistrial. "Your Honor, with all due respect, you cannot preside fairly over this case. This is a clear conflict of interest." Isaiah leaned forward, his voice calm but unyielding. "Your motion is noted and denied. This court will proceed." The gavel struck, echoing like a thunderclap. The gallery exhaled as if they had all been holding their breath. Pamela's eyes widened, her composure cracking for the first time. The woman who had once ruled Harmony Ridge with her clipboard and venomous smile now looked small-cornered in a room where her power had no reach. But Isaiah knew the hardest part wasn't the verdict. It was staying true to himself. Every objection he sustained, every word he spoke was under a microscope. Reporters dissected his tone. Neighbors whispered about whether he was being too hard or too soft. He carried not just the weight of justice, but the burden of proving that justice was still possible when the line between personal and professional blurred. As the prosecution rested, the gallery felt the heaviness of inevitability. The truth was laid bare. Pamela had crossed from petty tyranny into hate-fueled destruction. The only question left was whether the jury would say it aloud. The jury returned after only 4 hours of deliberation. The room hushed as the foreperson stood, verdict slip in hand. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Pamela Whitaker, guilty of felony arson, guilty of destruction of property, guilty of aggravated harassment with hate crime enhancement." Gasps filled the gallery. Laurel pressed her hands to her mouth, tears of relief brimming. Victor exhaled, muttering under his breath, "Justice." Linda Garvey whispered a quiet prayer. Pamela shook her head violently, shouting, "No, this isn't right." But the gavel struck once, firm and final. 2 weeks later, sentencing brought the courtroom full again. Pamela looked smaller now, her once rigid posture gone, orange jumpsuit hanging loosely from her frame. The prosecutor's words were sharp. This was not an accident. It was deliberate, fueled by prejudice, intended to destroy not just property but dignity. A community cannot thrive under fear. Justice demands accountability, her lawyer begged for leniency, painting Pamela as overwhelmed and misunderstood. But no one in the room believed it anymore. Isaiah leaned forward, removing his glasses. His voice was steady, measured, but every word carried the weight of loss and resilience. "You burned down my home. You destroyed years of memories. You endangered my life and the lives of my neighbors. And for what? Because you could not see me as your equal. I believe in justice, not vengeance. But justice means facing the truth. And the truth is this: you chose hate, you chose violence, and now you must live with the consequences." The gavel struck. 22 years in prison, parole possible after 15. Pamela's face drained of color as deputies led her away. Outside the courthouse, cameras swarmed. Reporters thrust microphones forward. Isaiah spoke briefly, his voice calm but firm. "I lost a house, but what we risk losing is bigger than brick and wood. We risk losing the belief that neighbors look out for one another. Hate begins small petty complaints, sharp words, and if ignored, it grows into something destructive. We cannot look away. We must confront it." That night, Isaiah stood across from the charred lot where his house once stood. Reconstruction would take months, maybe years, but already neighbors were offering support. Casseroles, handshakes, words of gratitude. They didn't thank him as a judge. They thanked him as a man who had shown them what courage and dignity look like in the face of hate. Victor clapped his shoulder. "You didn't just win a case, Isaiah. You showed people what it means to stand tall." Isaiah smiled faintly. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's refusing to let fear decide what happens next. As the crowd thinned and silence fell, Isaiah whispered words to the night. Words he wished his late wife could hear. "We're still standing. That's enough." The story of Harmony Ridge spread far beyond Savannah. It appeared in newspapers, on evening news, in whispered conversations across the country. People saw more than a burnt house and a prison sentence. They saw the lesson etched into its ashes: dignity can outlast hate, and one person's courage can awaken an entire community, the lesson is clear. Patience and self-respect are never weakness. Sometimes all it takes is one person willing to hold the line for the entire community to find its voice. And if this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. More real stories of justice, resilience, and hope are waiting to inspire you.